Just a reminder that I'm currently fundraising to eliminate over 150,000 Rand of UCT student debt. And if you'd like to contribute and donate to my campaign, feel free to click the link below and contribute to my UCT student debt campaign. Any amounts that you can contribute is valued and appreciated, and I'd really appreciate your support on this. And if you'd like to check out other links, including my art store and my ebook called Solo Journeys, feel free to click the links below and check those out as well. Hello and welcome back to Deep Topics with Shaun. I'm your host, Shaun, and thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you're new to the channel and you'd like to hear more, feel free to subscribe on the channel that you're watching or listening to this on, whether that's YouTube or Spotify. And if you want to check out previous episodes of Deep Topics with Shaun, simply click anywhere around this episode and review previous episodes, including 3 episodes of Season 2 and 12 episodes of Season 1. So in today's podcast, I'm going to start by telling you a story, and the story is one that's related to my spiritual journey. And I think that when I first started exploring spirituality, I think we all come across this. There's a foundational Sanskrit text called Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he lays out 8 limbs of the yoga path, of which asana or body postures are one of those limbs. Limbs meaning, appendages or limbs of a specific body. So in addition to that, there are other limbs involving observances, restraints, breathing techniques, and other aspects. So having discovered that over the past time and slowly, incrementally incorporating those aspects, one starts off slowly by practicing those fundamental and basic aspects before moving on to those that are more complex. So starting off with the restraints, starting off with the observances, practicing them in daily living, and making sure that they are incorporated sufficiently into one's mindset and one's behavior is where one is advised to start. Once you start doing that, you move on to bodily postures, breathing techniques, concentration, meditation, and so on. So what I've been doing is I recognize that meditation is one of those aspects that is very much fundamental in the spiritual journey. To be able to practice inner observation is probably the most important thing that one can do when seeking to expand one's spiritual awareness. And so when I first discovered meditation in 2019, you might already have heard the story, but my meditation journey was more so about dealing with an angry boss and preparing myself mentally and emotionally to not be shaken by the anger and volatility of that individual. When I left that job in 2019, I fell into a deep depression, and my meditation technique increased to over 2 hours a day, during which my consciousness was expanding. I was dealing much better with the state of depression. I was more so observing my mind and body, and it helped me to separate myself from what I was thinking and feeling at the time. And in doing so, to overcome those impulses and to shift my life into a new trajectory that led me to where I am today. So when I think about where my meditation has gone and how far I've taken my meditation technique, I can already see that there's more to go. I can already look at what some of the foundational and fundamental spiritual texts are saying about meditation and are saying about the deepest meditation states and the states of awareness that are available to one that practices meditation. And I can see that there's a long way to go. In the meantime, I've recognized that if meditation is I did mention, there are restraints and observances, and those are things that have to do with mindset and behavior. And then there are practices, the meditation, postures, bodily postures, and breathing restraints. So when it comes to the bodily postures, I have come across the book Light on Yoga by BKS Iyengar, and I've looked at some of those bodily postures, and I've already recognized that the way that my life is going will require me to practice those bodily postures. But in relation to the meditation, there are some bodily postures that are called bandhas or locks. And these have to do with keeping in subtle energy in the body during one's meditation technique. Those locks are practiced while seated in a meditation posture, and they have to do with sitting in a cross-legged position and making sure that one is in a state whereby one can capture that subtle energy within the body and keep it there, um, to be able to expand one's consciousness further and further. There is a lock that is called Uddiyana Bandha, and the way that it's shown is a person standing up, crouching forward slightly, putting one's hands on one's knees, taking a deep inhalation, closing one's eyes, visualizing a point 12 feet above the crown, and sucking in one's abdomen while pulling the chin towards the chest. So I felt like, okay, I'm comfortable enough to want to try this Uddiyana Bandha yoga posture in wherever I feel like it. And at first I tried it. Okay, I've been trying it a lot in various places, like whenever I feel like it. Actually, coming back from the gas station, and okay, I feel like it's the right time. Let me try it. Um, Going back to my room, okay, I feel like it's the right time. Let me try it. Then one day I try it in the kitchen. One day I try it in the kitchen, and do it as usual. I'm alone in the kitchen, so at first I lean forward slightly, put my hands on my knees, take a deep inhalation, visualize a point 12 feet above the head, and put the chin towards the chest and do it. And then something interesting happens. I leave, my consciousness leaves my physical body for 2 to 3 seconds. And it was not something that was gradual, where as it was leaving, I'd pull myself back and say, no, don't go, you're in a public space. It was something that was instantaneous, but the arrival was gradual. So the leaving of the physical body was instantaneous. And for the 2 to 3 seconds that I wasn't there, I didn't have any memory of being in that kitchen. And I also didn't have any memory of where I actually was. I do know, however, that I wasn't in the physical body, because when my consciousness had left the physical body, with nothing holding it up anymore, it fell over. It fell over. And when in the kitchen, it fell over backwards. I'm so glad that I didn't hurt any part of myself at that point, but I did alarm myself that, wait, Shaun, you're in a public space, and if you had fallen over and people are around, they'd be very concerned about you. So, not thinking anything of it, thinking that it's a fluke and there's no way that that was anything. Days, maybe weeks went by, and after taking a shower, I thought to myself, you know what, let me try this again. Let me try Uddiyana Bandha again. I put my clothes on, took a shower, put my clothes on, and okay, on 2 feet, lean forward slightly, put my hands on my knees, take a deep inhalation, visualize a point 12 feet above the head with eyes closed, take a deep inhalation, put my chin towards my chest, and my consciousness is gone for 2 to 3 seconds again. Where did it go? I don't know. How do I know it was gone? Because I wasn't there. With no consciousness holding up my physical body, guess what? It falls over again. This time, it fell forward and my face slammed into the ground at 9.8 meters per second. Slammed into the ground. Slammed. There was a lump on my cheek, and my consciousness arrived gradually but fast. As soon as, I would say, not as soon as, like a second or two after my face slammed into the ground. That was the, like, okay, come back. You're here now. It didn't leave gradually. It was not something where I could have said, no, Shaun, you're in a public space, don't go. It left instantaneously. I didn't even know I was gone until I came back and then didn't have memory of the 2 to 3 seconds. So, of course, I was concerned and grateful that my head did not slam into the corner of the glass sink, because that would have been a disaster. But also grateful that my body's reflexes kicked into place biologically, even though my consciousness and my perception were not present in the body at the time. So after my face slammed into the ground, of course, I'm grateful that there's no blood or anything like that. And then I pick myself up, and then I, gather my things, and I leave and I go to my room. But then I notice that as the swelling decreases over the next couple of days, that there's blood that has pooled around my eye, and now I'm left with a black eye. Not only am I left with a black eye, but I'm left with the mental feeling of having been abused, even though that didn't happen, and I don't know why. It felt like I was holding on to the memories or feelings of somebody else who actually was abused in a domestic violence situation. Whose feelings those were, I don't know. Why was I adopting those? I don't know. When I was walking out in public, I was feeling ashamed. In my consciousness, I was feeling like a domestic abuse survivor, and that didn't happen. Why was that happening to me? I don't know. And when people were asking me what's going on, their first thought was that, did somebody punch you? Did somebody abuse you? Who punched you? Why that was their first thought, I don't know. There are many, many ways of hurting oneself in that way, where blood rushes to a site in the face very fast and takes a couple days, maybe weeks, to then reabsorb back into the body. So there are a lot of lessons from this experience, and I think that one of the major lessons from this experience was that humility was not at the level that it should have been. I was taking risk that I was not ready to take. I was taking risks that I was not ready to take. I was thinking that I was prepared on something that I wasn't prepared on. And I practiced a risky yoga technique without the proper safeguards and in an unsafe environment. I think that, having learned the lesson now, that if I ever do that posture, that I can't do that posture standing up, because if the consciousness leaves the physical body, then the physical body will be pulled by gravity. And to avoid it being pulled by gravity, it must be supported in some way. Now, do I put cushions on front and behind me? No, because the physical body is going to fall anyways. And the impact, even if it's a soft one, will pull my consciousness back from wherever it was. So to give myself more than 2 to 3 seconds wherever it went, to give myself also the opportunity of exploring that dimension or space or area or wherever or realm or whatever that was will require me to have my physical body in a position whereby it is supported. And that supported space likely is cross-legged in meditation, sitting upright. It just so happened that as I continue to meditate and to try to do this posture, that it doesn't feel like I've gone anywhere. But perhaps the feeling of my legs touching the chair, if that remains, if I still have that feeling, then it tells me that I'm still there. It tells me I'm not gone anywhere. The sign for me having gone somewhere was that I had no feeling and no experience of physical reality in those 2 to 3 seconds. So that for me was a very interesting situation. It was a dangerous situation. It was a scary situation. I was wearing sunglasses afterwards for a couple of days to just deal with the shame of it all, but also to avoid the concern on people's faces. Sometimes they would look at me in a concerning way, and to avoid that concern, I would, put the sunglasses on. I got to a space later where I recognized that this bruise is lighter and it's kind of looking cool. I can just embrace it and go with it. But before that, it was very much scary, and I don't think I processed how scary that situation was. I don't think I processed how scared I was. I don't think I processed the trauma of what could have happened, of the alternatives that could have happened in that bathroom that didn't. So, getting to the learnings, in addition to one of those learnings being about humility, it's telling me that it's very much necessary that more humility should have been practiced in that sense. And having seen that aspect also tells me that, maybe I wasn't as humble as I could have been, and practicing that risky technique in that public space got me to a situation that was very dangerous and put my body in physical harm. So, having learned that lesson of taking more care of oneself, not thinking that I'm more advanced than I actually am, not taking too great risks that are beyond my capabilities, are definitely lessons that I took from that. And if I'm going to take risk with practicing anything, that I should be taking that risk with being in a safe, supported, comfortable position, whereby if there is anything challenging going on, that I know my physical body is not going to fall forward and slam into the floor. And that's a recap of what happened over the past week or two. I've come so far in terms of my spiritual journey. Even though it's only been 6 years of meditation, I still do remember those times in 2020 where I struggled to meditate for an hour, and those times in 2024 where I didn't have awareness of my physical body anymore. I'm so grateful for how far I've come. I'm so grateful for having been persistent with the practice. I'm so grateful for having stuck with it. I'm so grateful for having learned the learnings, and continuously, incrementally made adjustments to grow and develop in that sense, and to learn what's working, what's not working, do more of what's working, do less of what's not working. What I've shared over the past time is a recap of a very scary, maybe even traumatic experience that I've experienced as a result of my own risk taking and a little bit of foolishness. what I see is that I must continue to take risk, definitely, but I must be more aware of the level that I'm at, and not to take risk that is too much beyond my capabilities. But if I am taking risk, that risk should be, it should have safeguards and fail safes in place. And when my face slammed into the ground and I had bruising and swelling and pain and all of those things, the pain definitely was intense for maybe 3 days. But what stayed was the muscle tension that was a result of the force dissipating throughout my skull, neck, and back. Because when my face slammed into the ground, when my consciousness left my physical body, my biological reflexes were still doing what they were doing. And the and when my face hit the ground, both my face, neck, and back muscles tightened to dissipate the force evenly throughout those muscles and to avoid the nervous system being damaged, shaken in any way. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful that my biological reflexes sought to protect the nervous system from any harm or damage. It tells me also that the humility, it felt like a punch from the earth, and it felt like a punch from the earth that was also a lesson in humility. Sean, you were being too prideful, maybe also in other areas of your life. Maybe you thought you were, maybe you could be more humble than you already have been. You thought you have been humble at 110%, maybe you could be humble at 145 or 185%. So I'm definitely taking that lesson of, if I ever think I'm practicing humility, I should practice more. There's never enough humility. And from last week's episode, what I intended to talk about and didn't get to was my Unilever horror story, which I'm so glad I started off with talking about humility, because from some of the people that I worked with there, I definitely did not experience any humility. It just so happens that I'm in a space in my life at the moment that can be considered challenging with regards to budgetary constraints. So, with regards to budgetary constraints and considering challenging, then it makes me think about what all of those experiences were in my previous experience and how it has led me to where I am today. So when I think about Unilever, one thing that I definitely think about at that time is that it was something that I was very much looking forward to as someone that was a new graduate going to find their first work experience. And when I graduated from UCT, I was one of those people, especially in my family, that did not struggle with getting that job straight out of university. Because I'd done so many internships at Unilever, I did an internship in 2016, I did an internship in 2017. I kind of shown in that sense that I was someone to be hired. And so when I was hired, I did have that expectation of how things would be, because there were various things about that graduate program that were framed um, as what one could expect by working there. So I'm talking about my Unilever experience because I started talking about a lesson in humility that I experienced over the past 2 weeks. And I never actually spoke about my Unilever horror experience or any of the corporate horror experiences that I experienced, which actually often involved a lot of tyrannical, prideful, narcissistic individuals. And up until this point, I never actually had processed any of those experiences to be able to put into context and perspective what actually happened during that time. So when I joined Unilever, I had expectations of what working there would be like. And you hear about the graduate program as this very prestigious program that very select few get involved into and get selected for. And there's a very rigorous recruitment process. But during one of my internships, I saw one of the graduates burnt out, stressed out, bursting into tears in the office, and me also having that experience, bursting into tears in a meeting room, feeling so overwhelmed, feeling like a failure, feeling like a fool, feeling like the pressure, the weight of the world was on my shoulders, and thinking, I want, this is such a, this is such a like challenging space. I want more of it, not realizing at the time that that is a trauma. It's a trauma to look at suffering and to ask for more. It's a trauma to reframe suffering or to romanticize suffering as something good. So, you know what? I got into that Unilever graduate program, and I was placed in a team that was tea category, and I was doing assistant brand manager for Glen Tea. And one of the first things I learned about my job there was that the manager that selected me for the team had left. The manager that had selected me for the team had left, and instead there was a new manager that had joined from a different division, and that new manager was now about to manage the T team. So we, doing work, and I was recognizing that that manager was joining me at meetings but really didn't want to be there and was not having the attitude of explaining things. That manager was not having the attitude of showing the way. She was having the attitude of figure it out on your own. And that attitude was not an empowering, encouraging attitude. It was an attitude of, I did it this way, you must do it this way too. So I could see that this Indian woman did not have any compassion for me as a fellow Indian individual, and did not have desire to help me out, but more so had desire to put me through the ringer and to create all types of hell and suffering, um, essentially making that job into a puppet show. There was a tea event, and this was somewhere around March, where I remember we were having a discussion about how to get to that event, and I asked her, can you give me a lift to that event? And she said no. I couldn't understand why at the time, because she was already going there, and she mentioned she was going with her husband. um, so we had dropped that, but it seems that me pushing on it and questioning further was taken by her as some type of shameful moment that was also overheard by colleagues in the immediate environment. And the next Monday, she was ready to have a passive aggressive discussion in full view of this canteen area, but keeping her voice down and calling the team individuals one by one and unloading fire and fury onto everyone. It turns out also that a colleague that I was working with, who was in the team T team before me, was experiencing the wrath and fury of this demonic woman more than I was. And I delusionally was developing a friendship with this girl because we were bonding over our hate for this woman who was actually fucking up our careers. And in addition to that, in addition to this woman reframing her shame into anger and fury, the tea team was the tea category was in a decline in South Africa. And the tea category was in a decline in South Africa, meaning that tea as a whole at Unilever was not doing well, and there was further pressure on her to perform. Furthermore, this new girl had joined the team, and this new girl was dumb as shit and had all the opportunities to just be a blonde. And when I looked at this girl being a blonde, the manager was giving that girl grace and was not giving me any grace. I did not have the opportunity to make mistakes. I did not have the opportunity to fail. I did not have the opportunity to be normal. In this demonic woman's eyes, I was meant to be in a state of perfection, and she was giving this dumb blonde, who was not really blonde, but she was giving this dumb girl a a grace card that she was not giving anybody else. So there was unfairness in that team as well. Um, there was another guy who had joined the team, and he escaped just in time into customer development division. I think he got a rotation and he left the team. So she was not giving him that type of treatment that she was giving us, that type of demonic fucked up treatment. And there was someone else who had joined the team who had returned from maternity leave that was, I think, used to crazy fucked up managers at Unilever, and so was not taking it the same way that I and this girl who was in the T team before me was taking it. So that was the dynamic of the T team. And then there was the dynamic of that after that lady had that very intense discussion with the entire team in the canteen area, it kind of set the tone of like, this woman doesn't give a fuck about that she's working with people. She has no emotional awareness. She is like a militant, tyrannical individual. And flash forward, you'll see that I come across two, three, maybe even four more of these people in my career. So, in addition to that fucked up attitude that this bitch was having, the remote working was no longer a free and flexible thing at that company. It required management approval, and she was not willing to give it. And when I was telling her, like, what you said to me had this effect, she was like, go speak to HR. So she was not even open to having a human conversation with me about her attitude that was creating tension between us. She was not willing to resolve it. She was not willing to resolve it in a one-on-one sense. And remote working, remember, I also spoke about some of these things about the graduate program were not applying anymore. Remote working was one of those things. They were doing rotations. They did a rotation for that guy that was in the T team who had left to join the customer development division. But then they were saying that they were not doing rotations anymore. And so I was feeling like I might have been in that role for an entire 3 years without any rotation. And that's not what I signed up for. I signed up for getting variety of experiences in variety of divisions. And the first thing was a stupid, fucked up, demonic bitch of a manager. The second thing was remote working was no longer applied. The third thing was rotations were not being done anymore. And the fourth thing was that the international opportunity was no longer guaranteed. It required a motivation. It required a motivation, which they were talking about some type of video, but it essentially looked like the company and the business as a whole was facing tough times and was not investing heavily into the graduate program as much as they were in the past. And furthermore, there was a shame in being a graduate. You learn from day one of joining that company. You learn from day one of joining that company that you do not talk about being a graduate at Unilever, because there are people that work there for 15 years and have not been promoted, and they can't understand how you can escalate in that company and they can't. So you are conditioned to walk around Unilever in a shameful attitude of being a graduate instead of celebrating your hard work, successes, and achievements. So I was starting to notice as I was working with this bitch of a woman that she was really like not having compassion. She was not having compassion, and she was not being an empathetic manager, and she was not even being a decent person. She was not even being a decent person. She was being tyrannical, militant, narcissistic. It looked like this woman's relationship with her parents was not warm and comforting. It looked like she did not have the opportunity to feel close and connected with her dad and her mom. And that's what was coming across, that she did not know how to give softness and gentleness. She did not know that. Having grown up in an Indian context, I'm familiar with how they glamorize and romanticize abuse. They do that. They have a two-faced approach of, I'm going to abuse you now, and I'm going to not tell you I love you, but I'm going to show you in actions and then make you mind read that that is appreciation, that is love, that is validation. So this woman was doing the same thing. This woman was doing the same thing. And it was, I was already starting to wonder, what the fuck am I doing here? Because this is not what I signed up for. I did not sign up for suffering. I signed up for this being my moment to thrive and flourish as a successful graduate who had come from nothing and was looking forward to make something out of their lives. I did not sign up to meet a stupid bitch who was trying to make my life hell. And instead, I met a stupid bitch who was trying to make my life hell. So I started to see that this woman was weaponizing feedback. Whenever she was feeling angry and furious, she would write her feedback. She would write her feedback. She would not give any positive points. She would only give negative points. She would write her feedback. She would write her feedback. And then in a moment of anger, she would send that email. And it would just hit out of the blue. Getting your feedback in an email, you know that this bitch was angry. So I was starting to see that this was an unhealthy relationship that I was in, and I was really conflicted about, is this normal? Is this normal for me to be in the situation where this doesn't feel like work? This feels like a drama reality show where I'm being abused mentally and emotionally by someone who I am under the care and consideration of. Like, I always thought that managers should care about their employees. I did not realize that many managers don't care about their employees. Many managers consider their employees to be pawns, to be coerced and manipulated in any which way they desire. And that's what I was experiencing from this lady at Unilever in my 9 months, in my 8 months of being there. So I think in month 8, there was like this food and refreshments conference. And the food and refreshments conference, I was tasked by the director to make this video that was going to be screened at the conference. And I made the video and I edited the video. And they usually were not like giving employees to do video editing, but I was already making vlogs on YouTube. So I volunteered to do the video editing, and I made the video, and they loved the video, and they wanted to give me a gift. They gave me a gift. The director gave me a gift. I could see the fury on this bitch's face, the fury that I was being rewarded for something that I did, and she felt that perhaps I didn't deserve it, or she felt that she wanted that validation and affirmation. I have no idea. I can only speculate. But I remember that at the end of that conference, she was not talking to me, and I was still unconscious at that point. So I did not confront it. Hey, what the fuck is going on here? Instead, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go on my way. I was still unconscious. If I was who I am now, I would have confronted it there and then. What do you think you're doing? Oh, Shaun, back then you were so ignorant and naive. You were so ignorant and naive, and you allow these stupid, fucked up people to manipulate you, and you really should have been the fire and fury that they never saw coming. Towards the end, I was writing this grievance. I was writing this grievance document, and I was talking to HR, and I was I was getting a sense that the HR were communicating with this manager about things that I was sharing with them in confidence, and that there was a conflict of interest there. It was not impartial. The HR business partner was not impartial in handling that issue, and even the HR director was not impartial in handling that issue. So I was writing that grievance, and I remember, the resolution that I was seeking for at the time, because I was still very much angry, and I wrote in that resolution that this woman should be dismissed. And then something like hit me out of the blue, and I thought to myself, the intention with which I'm going into this should not be to hurt that person. If they are sick, then they should get treatment. And so instead, I remember changing it at the end that this woman should get rehabilitation and training and something like that. And I remember sending that document to the HR. It just so happened that weeks later that they had called me into this type of meeting, and I was being put on involuntary leave. But prior to that, I had already resigned. I had resigned because, you know what, I was starting to feel that this relationship was really irreconcilable at this point. And so I forwarded an email of resignation, and I was still kind of working there, not even knowing about notice period, not even thinking about notice period, but still going to work, not having a discussion about this. But, even having conversation with some teams that, I had sent a resignation. Is there a possibility that I could join your team? I was having those conversations. So when I got into that meeting of you're being like sent on involuntary leave, I was kind of a bit shaken because I I was hearing about how this woman was, she had accounts of people that uh, had told her of me expressing my dissatisfaction towards them. And she was trying to create this perception that she was trying to create this perception of like, oh, look at what all these people were saying about you. But at the back of my mind, what I thought to myself was that I thought I had trusting con- confidential relationships with these individuals that I'd confided in. These people would smile to my face and would appear to be caring and would appear to be showing concern for the suffering that I was experiencing. So when I was hearing that actually this person said you said this about me, this person said you said this about me, it did not occur to me that gossip was part of the Unilever culture. And what I thought was me sharing my grievances with my colleagues in confidence, I thought that was part of the culture. To her, was her taking accounts of how I didn't want to work there and I didn't want to be under that management. And the truth is, I didn't want to work then. I didn't want to be under that management because this bitch of a woman made my life a hell and completely incinerated the opportunity for me to have a thriving and successful career at that organization. So at the end of that meeting, I knew that I'd also heard stories of this woman and about other managers in that organization that had done weird things to their employees behind closed doors. And I knew that this woman was doing this over and over, and it was a cycle. It was a cycle that was continuing, and that nobody was doing anything about it, and that's why it was continuing. So I made sure, I knew that there's one thing that people saw about me is that I was trustworthy. I never told a lie. I always had a spine, I always had a backbone, and I always had integrity. And I could use that to bring change. And so, because in the seeking of the resolution, I spoke about therapy, I knew that the intention of the document was not to hurt but to treat. And so I sent that document, that grievance document, to as many people in my contact list as I could. Actually, I didn't know at the time. I didn't know at the time that an HR document was something that you keep in confidence with HR. I didn't know at the time. To me, it was social justice. It was social justice. I was bringing justice for those that were burned before me. I was bringing justice to make sure that nobody will experience what I experienced at the hands of this woman. And I did what I needed to do. I essentially was a scapegoat. And with being sacrificed, I made sure to leave a mark, not just on that person, but on that team and on that company and that organization and on everybody that read that document. I made sure to list every negative thing that that woman did to me in that document and to send it to everyone so that they see clearly what I had experienced there. I only told them 3 to 5 words of my horrific experience at the hands of this stupid bitch who really destroyed my career there. There was a whole document. I still sometimes wish I could read it today. I still sometimes wish I could read it and see what What a beautiful, wonderful thing. What a specimen. What an artifact. What an artifact. Some of you might still have that document if you ever see it in your email. What a fucking wonderful document to ever have landed in your email inbox. Wow. And then I learned weeks later that you're being fired. I'm being fired. I fucking resigned. What are you talking about? I'm being fired. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. I think being fired was their way of avoiding any CCMA things, but who the fuck is going to want to work in that shitty place after experiencing what I did for 9 months? I know there are people out there that think, you know what, it's so hard to find a job. And then they deal with stupid, fucked up people on a daily basis just for 25,000 Rand. I was one of those people and I did it for 9 months. Actually, I did it for 8 months. And that's essentially my Unilever horror experience. It was a horror. I remember at the end of that, I was in depression. I was in depression. I was smoking many, many cigarettes a day. I felt like a piece of shit. I felt like a worthless nobody, nothing, nothing to ever walk the earth. Don't deserve to live. Kill yourself. That's what I felt like. I felt angry at this woman. I felt angry at myself for romanticizing the suffering that I saw 2 years prior and thought to myself, I'm going to join this organization. It's going to be so wonderful. I'm going to grow and thrive and flourish. Only to find out that somebody had other plans. And somebody's other plans were not to help me out and to make me into a decent manager, but to actually make sure that I am kept at arm's length as low as possible and to never outshine this person, to never appear competent. She would say things like, I always defend you behind closed doors. But I highly doubt that that was happening. Based on what I know now, I think she was throwing me under the bus. Reliably so. Reliably, because that's the type of person that she was. And when I asked the girl who I thought I was friends with, remember the girl who had left that team, the guy left the team to join customer development division. The girl left the team to join some office in Joburg, Foundry, whatever bullshit. I thought this girl was my friend. Even when I went to Joburg, would hang out with her. Stupid me for thinking a colleague is a friend. I should have known that when she told me she blocked me on and blocked all colleagues on WhatsApp status that this person wasn't considering me a friend. And that even though we're drinking and hanging out, that wasn't a friend, that was a colleague. When I'd asked her, can you testify to any of these things in my document? You had it worse than I did. I wasn't hearing from her. Wasn't hearing from her. She wasn't showing any ounce of a spine. She wasn't showing any ounce of a backbone. She was the only one that knew what was happening because she had it worse than me, but she didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. And so I left there cashing out my pension and having to repay that relocation allowance of like 30,000 Rand, and then having to start from scratch. Having to start from scratch, thinking that Unilever was going to be the thriving, flourishing, successful career that I'd hoped for. Remember growing up, they told me, you're going to get a job, you're going to have a house, you're going to have a car, you're going to travel the world. It never fucking worked out that way, because that Indian woman who I thought as a fellow Indian, you would have compassion for me because you know that you came up in your career as a woman firstly, and perhaps experienced very much challenging situations more than I did, and that you would make it easier for me purely out of compassion, not because I deserve it having it easier, but purely out of compassion for another human being. Only to recognize that the same attitude that my uncle, my mother's brother, let me not call uncle and aunt anymore, because let me put it into perspective. My mother's brother had this attitude: I trudged through ounces of mud and walked kilometers to go to school, and you have it so easy. They have this idea that just because they suffered, you should be suffering as much as they did. Stay away from those type of people. Stay away from those type of people. So I hope that my Unilever horror, you know what? My Unilever horror experience, I dealt in summary, I went to Unilever believing, sorry, in summary, I went to Unilever believing that I am getting into one of the top graduate programs in the country. Instead, what I learned about Unilever was that there's a pervading culture of gossip and toxicity whereby individuals are tragically insecure about themselves and their positions, and furthermore, management have an attitude of treating employees with coercion, intimidation, anger, and violent outbursts, passive aggressive nature, and weaponizing feedback. Many individuals suffer and have suffered like I did, enduring the wrath and fury of their managers instead of the shepherding, gentle nature that a manager should be. And you heard that right. A manager should be a shepherding, gentle nature, not an angry, fucked up mess. Furthermore, I met the first of many individuals in my career who did not receive warmth and connection from their parents. They were probably treated like a project, something to be worked on, and were given a conditional form of love, attention, and validation that was based on performance, which helped me to understand why they dish out the same thing. I also got into that team, the tea team, at a point in time where tea was not increasing in sales nationally, and Unilever tea sales were diminishing at the time. Furthermore, the graduate program, at the beginning, I was conditioned to be shameful about the graduate program and about my status as a graduate. And I was told to not talk about being a graduate because there are individuals in their organization that worked for decades without being promoted and would not like to hear how I, as a graduate, am having opportunities that they did not get access to. Furthermore, I did not have opportunity for remote working, which prior to that was told to me as something that I would have access to. And in fact, with this demonic woman who was my manager, I was not even getting access to even the approval of that remote working. Furthermore, whenever this woman was having a negative impact on my mental and emotional well being, she was not open to having a one on one human personal discussion about it to get to a resolution, but was actually asking me to talk to HR about it. Furthermore, rotations were mentioned as no longer occurring. And as someone who valued the opportunity to learn about different divisions, I was starting to see that I will likely not get the opportunity that I was promised up front. And the final thing was that international opportunities as part of the graduate program were no longer given, but were needing a form of motivation in the form of a video. And that told me that many of the pillars that my Unilever experience were based on were actually incrementally and perpetually crumbling over the 8 months that I'd worked there. And having it negatively affect my mental, emotional, and physical well-being to the extent that it did told me that it was time to exit. It was time to exit and it was time to move on. And I might not know what's going to happen after this, but to not be here and to not have nothing would be better than to be here, to be enduring that type of inhumane, cruel, fucked up treatment on a daily basis, the type of inhumane, cruel, fucked up treatment that everyone is going through and nobody's talking about, all just for 25,000 rand. It was not worth it. I remember at the end of that experience, the light. I was still eating meat at the time, and I was eating these KFC wings. And I remember on my desk, I drew a sketch of KFC wings, and it was the first sketch that I'd seen of, wow, Shaun, this sketch looks good. This sketch looks good. This sketch looks like not just decent, it looks very good. And the light was starting to beam again, that perhaps the inner, authentic, creative self was beginning to show itself as seeking greater expression. And it was telling me that, having hid that part of myself for such a long time, that it was seeking to come through in greater and greater extents. And I saw a sign, and that sketch was a sign. Flash forward in another episode, I'll tell you about it. 12 months later, I'll be applying to art school. So I hope that you hearing about my lesson in humility, and then hearing about my Unilever horror experience, which I've finally spoken about since it happened in 2018, that you take something from this. And no job is worth your mental, emotional, and physical health. Like, sometimes I scroll on TikTok, and I scrolled yesterday, and this girl was saying this banking company doesn't care about my health. I've been in hospital, this and that. Doesn't matter if you're pregnant. They send you this letter. This person was hurt by a client. They sent out an email. I was starting to realize that some of these businesses are working with people, but those people ignore their own humanity, and they ignore your humanity as well. And there's this attitude, they call it professional, which that attitude is like, you're cold, you don't have any emotions, you're attempting to be rational and logical, and you invalidate your humanity and operate as a labor. There's a delusion there in a professional nature that humans have been operating under in perhaps over the past couple hundred years. And that delusion is threatening our longevity, is threatening how we understand work, is threatening how we see contributing to society in labor, in work, and is really threatening what the university trajectory offers us. Because me, as a graduate experiencing what I experienced, I'm not the first person to see that it's not only corporate politics and chess, that it's also mental, untreated mental conditions, unloved individuals, tyrannical, narcissistic individuals that thrive on power, manipulation, coercion, and control. Inhumane, cruel, fucked up treatment, pervading seemingly the best graduate program 2018, best careers, voted by Sagier, whatever fucking shit that is. Clearly, the people that are voting these best organizations are not really hearing the testimony of the individuals that work there. And the people that work there also don't have a spine. They don't have a spine, they don't have a backbone. I worked with some of the most spineless individuals you will ever come across in your entire life. People who didn't have values, people who didn't have morals, people who didn't have ethics, people who would suck the ground for 10,000 rand. They would suck your boots and the soles under it for a bunch of couple thousands. What pathetic individuals to come across in one's life and one's career. And if you're watching this and you know that you're one of those people, then sorry, do something about it. There are many, many lessons from that Unilever horror story. I should not even seek to sum up one lesson. Take whatever lesson you can from it. But from what I've seen, I'd not learned the lesson, and I'm going to tell you about it in another episode where I talk about Brighton horror experience. Brighton horror experience was not to the extent of Unilever, because I had kind of developed in some ways. To not handle the weird shit that I was handling previously, to talk up more, to not be a pawn or a puppet to any of those things. And in some ways, it was not even a horror experience. It was a tragic. Brighton was a tragic experience. It was not a horror experience. Unity was a horror experience and a tragic experience because I was ignorant, I was innocent, and I was naive. I was a sheep that went in there seeking to make my mark on the world and instead got slaughtered. Got slaughtered. And perhaps scapegoated myself for a righteous cause. For a righteous cause. For a righteous cause. I hope I brought justice. I hope I brought justice. I hope that no manager ever looked at an employee the same way again after they read what I written in that document. I'm so proud of myself. I'm proud of myself of who I have become. Who I have become, the strong, capable individual that I've become right now. I'm so glad and I'm so grateful that it looks like the Unilever horror experience was necessary for my growth. It shared a part of myself that believed that work was a positive, uplifting place. I now know that organizations, more often than not, are not a positive, uplifting place, even though they frame their values that way on the corporate documents, even though they have those charts and those promotional materials and those websites that speak all the marketing. Deep down inside, many of those organizations are rotting. They are rotting with disgusting, disgusting people. Disgusting people. If you ever meet one of those disgusting people, never let it go. Never, never, never let it go. If you let it go, somebody will be hurt after you. Never let it go. Do something about it. Stick within the regulations, is what I can advise. Stick within the regulations, but use your voice. Speak up. Make a noise about it. Make a noise about it. And leave there with your head held high, with your back upright. Have a fucking spine. Have morals, have ethics, and don't let anybody treat you as a fucking coffee table. I hope that was helpful for you. Thanks so much for watching this episode of the Deep Topics podcast with Shaun. And I'm so glad and grateful that you took time to listen to my story. And I hope you take any lesson or any value that you can from this insight and reflection from my life. My fundraiser campaign is still active. I'm seeking to raise over 150,000 to help eliminate my UCT student debt. And if you would like to contribute and donate to my campaign, click the link in the description below. Any amount that you can donate is valued and appreciated. In addition to that, if you want to subscribe to my podcast, if you want to listen to upcoming episodes, you can click subscribe whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on Spotify. You can also purchase any of the art that I have created on my travels at my art store. This art is available in original drawings and prints. And you can also purchase my new book called Solo Journeys. And this is a book that I've written for those that want to embark on solo adventures like I have. Because I've seen that over the past time, creating TikToks of my daily vlogs and solo adventures has really inspired, uplifted, and motivated people to want to understand more about how I do what I do. I appreciate all forms of support. So if you're liking, commenting, subscribing, and so on, I'm very much grateful. And thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And I'd love for you to join me for more episodes. And I'm so glad and grateful that you've joined me. Thanks so much for listening. And I want to wish you a wonderful day. Take care. This is Shaun. Bye, everyone.